Welcome to Washington in Focus. I am Jeremy Lott. Joining me today is the Center Square's Western Washington reporter, Spencer Pauly. Constantine held his 2023 State of the County address, in which he warned of potential cuts in services. The county's primary funding source is the property tax, but Constantine blames a 1% cap on property tax revenue for creating a gap in the general fund. Washington state voters passed the cap in 2001. Notably, the majority of King County votes were against the legislation. Spencer, what's going on here? What's the Dow Constantine obviously says the property taxes aren't enough, yes?
Yeah, well, during his State of the County address on Tuesday, Constantine was talking about what, his priorities for this coming year and the following year, but says that basically the budget's going to be in trouble by 2025, the next time they have to set up the biennium budget. He says that, expect a general fund deficit of 80 million to 100 million by then. And it's basically because of this property tax cap, he says. Basically, right now it's at 1%. And so revenue is going at a lower rate than the cost of maintaining services, what he's saying. And so what he wants to do is he pretty much pushed House legislators to pass this bill that would raise the cap to 3%, and that would make it more worthy. So,
which would be a 200% increase over what's currently allowed.
Yeah. He says basically warning that there's going to be cuts to essential services because of this. Some of the things he mentioned that would be public health clinics. Sheriff deputies would be at risk from this. And even like the election staff for the county.
So it might take even longer to count out our elections?
Yeah, you could see that.
Has there been any pushback to Constantine over what he said here?
Not yet, but when he did talk about the House bill, when it was in committee, only Democrats voted in favor of the House bill. The minority did not vote at all. They were opposed to this bill.
This is a threat to, according to Constantine, this is a threat to essential services. I guess there's two things. One, they've been funding an awful lot of things through levies. If the legislature were to not do this, would, the one of Constantine's tactics to be to float more levies to try to deal with this sort of thing, do you think?
You could see that happening. He's already pushed more and more levies, and so you're going to see some for election come in April. This includes this levy to create a network of behavioral crisis centers, and more so. And I think that's his way of funding for some of his initiatives, including building more housing, creating behavioral health centers, and his environmental initiatives as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's got a lot of money in through the environmental stuff lately. Sticking on the subject of essential services, you did what I consider this to be a fascinating piece. Over 4,000 non-English 911 calls were made in 45 languages in Seattle in 2022. Spencer actually called me up and said, is this of interest? I have this information, and I said, yes, I want to hear about it. I want to tell people. I'm going to run down the tally of how many calls in what language. In Spanish, 2,733 calls. In Vietnamese, 346 calls. In Mandarin, 277 calls. In Cantonese, 146 calls. In Korean, 91 calls. Also, 91 calls in Somali, 70 calls in Russian. I don't even know how to pronounce one of these languages.
Hard to pronounce some of them, yeah.
Tigrinya, 60 calls. Arabic, 35 calls. 34 in Mongolian, 30 in Brazilian Portuguese, which is different than Portugal Portuguese, I guess. 25 in French, and the list goes on. I'm going to go down to some of the single ones. These were fascinating to me. One in Burmese, one in Fuzu, I believe, one in Hmong, one in Macedonian, and one in Wolof, which I don't even know what that is. How do they process these calls? Because it's, I guarantee the operators do not speak all of these languages.
Well, I talked to the 911 center, and what they said is while they have some of their dispatchers are fluent in other languages, it's such a serious task that they rely on Cybercom to have translators available. So when dispatchers or even officers on patrol see that there is a different language being spoken, they have a translator from Cybercom on hold, and they transfer over to them to help translate what they're saying.
Are there any limits to do they have all the languages?
As far as I know, yeah, as including Wolof. There was 45 languages that were spoken in all these 911 calls. I believe it was over 4,000 altogether were non-English. Now this, in total, there were 615,000 calls.
So, it's a small percentage percentage, but still, it's fascinating to me.
And it just shows how, diverse the city of Seattle is, just to have this many people speak that many languages.
Absolutely. Well, listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Spencer Polly, this is Jeremy Lott. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.